Superboned. The communal public outpouring of emotion that surrounds the passing of a celebrity has become a cultural phenomenon of late. Sometimes it makes sense, and other times it doesn't resonate enough with me to react or elicit any response. Sometimes, even if a musician or actor dies whose work you aren't as familiar with, you can't help but feel an unsettling eeriness when you think of this particular person no longer being here to add their body of work. In the seemingly endless wake of celebrity deaths we've endured over the last year or so, there was one recently that left a deeper pang in my heart than many of the others. However, this is not a story about the death of a celebrity and my obsessive emo-ness over it. This is a story about heartbreak and a lesson well learned. This story is about a girl named Cheryl. Late in 1996, I was quickly approaching the end of the first semester of my senior year of high school. What a time. I was, of course, learning about all kinds of new things at this time in my life, and one of them happened to be music. I was raised on classic country, transitioned into gangster rap briefly, which was the style at the time, then finally was ushered into the world of rock and roll by a number of elements and people. One person in particular was, and still is, my very good friend Jeremy. When I was a freshman and sophomore, it was him beating me over the head with Guns N' Roses when I wouldn't dare take Tupac from my Discman. One of the bands Jeremy introduced me to is Soundgarden, and I got way into them. We blasted the Super Unknown album into the maroon Ford Taurus that belonged to his parents everywhere we went for an entire summer, waiting for the next album to come out. When it did, in May of 1996, we spent that entire summer listening to it, also mostly in the same Ford Taurus. The band announced a massive tour that wouldn't land in Houston until November 26th, 2 days before Thanksgiving. Jeremy was a year older than me and already off at college during this time and was unable to attend the Houston show. I didn't have too many other friends interested, but I bought 2 tickets the day they were released, confident I would find someone to go with me. I didn't have much luck with the ladies back then and lacked the confidence and self-awareness it took to be assertive in that regard. I was a dorky theater kid just doing my thing, so when a girl actually paid attention to me, I was confused as I was enthralled. Enter Cheryl. Now, this wouldn't be the first time Cheryl had made an entrance into the stage production of my life, and unfortunately it wouldn't be the last. Cheryl was about as wholly and completely out of my league as she could be. I'm talking, she's in the majors, and I was on a Japanese farm league who only played against the ragtag groups of local fishermen. At least that's how I viewed it at the time. We'd gone out several times throughout my high school career, but it never materialized into a relationship, probably mostly due to my low self-esteem, making me wonder why someone like her would want to date me. I didn't get it, but each time I still allowed myself to develop feelings I was too timid to express for fear that they would be unreciprocated. I got to know Cheryl through her mild dabbling in theater, but her main group of friends is what you would call the popular kids. I knew all these people as well, but only in a peripheral sense. I knew my place in the social hierarchy of high school and was well aware I fell several rungs below them on that ladder. I would see Cheryl date guys in this group, then every once in a while go out with me for reasons I couldn't wrap my head around. But this was high school, so nothing really made sense. As the day of the concert was rapidly approaching, I was unable to find anyone interested in going with me. My thoughts turned to Cheryl, and I briefly entertained the idea of asking her to come see one of my favorite bands with me. I started off by asking if she was busy the following night, to which she said no. Then I laid it on her that I had an extra ticket to see Soundgarden, and did she want to go with me? To my delight, she happily accepted, claiming she loved Soundgarden. The next morning when I saw Cheryl at school, she informed me she forgot she had a basketball game that night, but she still wanted to go if I could wait until it was over. She said I should come to the game. And as soon as it was over, she quickly changed and we could go. I went to class doing the math in my head, trying to predict when we would actually arrive to the show, and if my calculations were correct, we would miss the opener but arrive shortly before Soundgarden took stage. We, of course, wouldn't be able to get anywhere near the front, but I'd have to deal with it. I showed up to the basketball game after it had started and took a seat in the bleachers. 2 rows lower than me sat a group of guys from the cool group, and I nodded as I walked past them to take a seat alone. A few minutes later, another member of this group arrived, high-fived his bros, and joined them in their row. His name was Corey with a K, whatever that means. And I knew him from having had several classes together over the years. After he was done exchanging pleasantries with his friends, I heard one of them ask, "So, what are you doing here?" "Just waiting," Corey replied. "I'm taking Cheryl out after the game." To say I wasn't prepared to hear something like that would be an understatement. I sat for a few minutes trying to swallow the lump in my throat and figure out what I was going to do. I could wait for the game to be over, have a confrontation with the two of them, still feel like shit, and be even later to the show, or I could just leave now and never mention it again. I opted for the latter, knowing I wasn't built to handle confrontation at that time in my life, let alone be the one who started it. I slunk from the bleachers, out of the gym, and through the parking lot into my 1986 single-cab Dodge Ram 50. Although I was smack dab in the middle of a real-life, common and overused romantic comedy troupe, I had no delusions of it working out for me in the end. All the elements were there, though. Hot girl shows interest in a dorky guy because he's different than what she's used to, but he can't get out of the way of his own experience awkwardness to make it work, so she's eventually lured back to the cool guy who treats her bad, which is fine because that's comfortable for her. Two things I'm notoriously poor judge of are time and distance, and on this particular night, I happened to misjudge both greatly. I was heading down to the now defunct International Ballroom, and had never been there, but it sounded classy. When I finally arrived, I parked, jumped out of my truck, and rushed through the lot to the entrance. Even from the back of the parking lot, I could hear Soundgarden playing, and in that moment, a joy overtook me, washing away the icky embarrassment I had been dwelling in for the duration of the drive. There was a small group of people milling around at the door, but nobody was going in. Two official-looking people in generic security shirts stood stoic and stone-facing at the entrance. There was a table set up to the left of them with some official-looking people behind it, sorting what at first glance looked like band merch. I was confused and approached one of the security personnel to see if I was perhaps at the wrong entrance, hoping to be redirected. It was then that I was informed that the show had been oversold and they weren't letting anyone else in. He referred me to the table off to the side, saying they would have information regarding refunds. I'm not a big crier, and certainly the situation hardly warranted tears. But due to the culmination of my rejection, humiliation, and now this heaped on top made it very hard to hold it together. I nodded, afraid speaking would unleash the waterworks, and I wandered over to the table, hanging back some to collect myself before making any inquiries. After I'd pulled it together enough to engage in conversation, I approached the table and was given instructions on how to get my money back. And I was offered my pick of a smattering of Soundgarden swag strewn across the table. I selected a vinyl copy of the new album and several stickers before walking back to my truck to drive home in silence. We didn't have school for the rest of the week because of Thanksgiving, so having a few days where I wouldn't have to see Cheryl or anyone else for that matter was a relief. I didn't call her over the break demanding an explanation because I didn't want one. She also didn't call me, and furthermore, when we went back to school, she didn't mention anything about it. A month or so later, the band finished that tour and broke up, not to get together again until 15 years later. I had never had another opportunity to see Soundgarden until very recently when their new tour was sending them through Houston. I was unable to see the show as well due to the unexpected and tragic death of their singer Chris Cornell less than a week before they were to be here. Upon hearing about his death, I reflected upon the band's music and the connection I felt to it. I also thought of this very story and how missed opportunities really have a way of sticking it in and breaking it off. I don't blame Cheryl for my never getting to see Soundgarden. It was just some dumb high school shit that everyone experiences in some way or another. And while the circumstances may vary slightly, the sentiment is still the same. Never fear, though, my friends, this situation, as shitty as it was at the time, became instrumental in me being able to change the way I saw and felt about myself in a positive light. I didn't need to make myself feel bad or think I was lesser than someone because of the perception of social status. I was an awesome dude. And fuck anyone who thought otherwise just because they had cooler genes than I did. Cheryl moved away somewhere years late, and I lost touch with her. But I ended up running into Corey with a K not too long ago. He's a property manager now for a company that owns strip centers. He's bald and has 2 kids and lives out in the suburbs of Katy. Looks like I can mark another tally in the win column for me.